What happens when a young lion cub strays too far from his mother and faces deadly hyenas, only to be saved by a seasoned ranger? Watch as Cassim races against time to reunite the cub with his protective mother, uncovering the true power of nature's bonds. It was a quiet morning in the Serengeti Reserve, where the golden grasslands stretched endlessly beneath the warm sun. The world seemed at peace. A lion cub named Kovu played joyfully with butterflies, tumbling through the tall grass. Kovu was the son of Nia, a lioness well known to the reserve management for her vital role in maintaining the pride's strength and genetic diversity. Every day, Nia would go hunting, or sometimes simply rest, while keeping an eye on her son from a safe distance. It was a carefree time in Kovu's young life, filled with discovery and innocent adventure. But the Serengeti, with its vast and unpredictable beauty, held hidden dangers, and Kovu's world was about to change. Chasing a particularly colorful butterfly, Kovu wandered farther than he intended, his small paws carrying him far from his mother's watchful eyes. In his excitement, he didn't notice how far he had strayed. The moment he stopped to rest, he realized with sudden dread that Nia was nowhere to be seen. A soft growl escaped his throat, but only the whisper of the wind responded. His heart began to pound in his chest. Panic set in. Kovu decided to find Nia. He wasn't sure which direction to go, but the instinct to reunite with his mother overpowered the fear that had begun to take hold of him. He ventured deeper into the grasslands, his small claws trembling as he moved. Suddenly, a faint rustle in the tall grass caught his attention. Kovu froze. From behind a nearby patch of bushes, 3 figures emerged, a pack of hyenas. Their eyes gleamed with malice, and their grinning faces betrayed the danger they posed. These hyenas were known for preying on the weak and isolated. They immediately recognized Kovu as an easy target. Kovu's fur bristled in fear, but he refused to back down. He let out a weak growl, trying to sound more threatening than he felt. The hyenas circled around him, inching closer with each passing moment. Kovu stood his ground, but his small, trembling body betrayed him. His growls grew quieter as the hyenas closed in. Just as Kovu's courage began to falter, the distant sound of a vehicle engine reached his ears. A sense of hope surged within him. From the edge of the clearing, a jeep appeared, slowly rolling to a stop. Cassim, a seasoned wildlife ranger who had worked in the Serengeti for over 10 years, recognized the cub instantly. He had been monitoring Nia's pride for years, tracking their movements to ensure the survival of the species. Seeing the hyenas closing in on the cub, Cassim knew he had to act fast. With a steady hand, he grabbed a long stick from the jeep and prepared a can of pepper spray, tools he had used many times before in similar situations. He stepped forward, raising his voice in a sharp, commanding shout. The hyenas hesitated for a moment, startled by the sudden human presence. Cassim waved the stick menacingly, and with a low growl, the hyenas retreated just enough for Kovu to dart toward the jeep. Kovu, terrified but with a flicker of hope, ran toward the vehicle, seeking refuge behind Cassim's legs. Cassim smiled softly, his heart lightened by the sight of the cub, but he kept his focus. The hyenas let out a few defiant calls, but dared not come any closer. They knew that humans, especially those with weapons, were not to be underestimated. Cassim took another step forward, swinging his stick and making loud noises. The hyenas, wary and unwilling to risk a confrontation, slowly backed off. Once the hyenas had retreated far enough, Cassim breathed a sigh of relief. He turned to pick up Kovu, who now seemed to feel safe. The cub, still trembling, nestled against Cassim's chest. Cassim's eyes softened as he reassured the cub in a low, gentle voice. "It's okay, little one." He placed Kovu carefully in the back of the jeep, making sure not to frighten him further. Then, without wasting a moment, He started the engine and drove off in search of Nia. Cassim drove steadily across the Serengeti, his eyes constantly flicking between the road and the cub in the back seat. Kovu had quieted, but his small body still trembled with fear. Cassim kept a careful eye on the cub, relieved to see that apart from a few scratches from the rough grass and thorns, Kovu seemed unharmed. Knowing Nia's usual hunting grounds, Cassim had a good sense of where she might be. After about 10 minutes of driving, he spotted a pride of lions lounging in the distance, their golden bodies stretched lazily across the plains. But Nia wasn't there. Cassim pressed on, following a faint trail of footprints through the grass. Every step seemed to draw him closer to the moment of reunion. Finally, after a few more minutes, he spotted her. Nia, standing atop a small mound, her eyes scanning the horizon. There was no sign of aggression in her posture, but Cassim could see the unmistakable worry in her eyes. He slowed the jeep to a stop and turned off the engine, taking a moment to observe her carefully. Nia, recognizing Cassim's scent, remained cautious but did not show signs of hostility. Over the years, she had become familiar with him, understanding that Cassim wasn't a threat. As Cassim carefully approached on foot, Nia's ears perked up, and she took a few tentative steps forward, sniffing the air. Kovu, sensing his mother's presence, let out a soft mewl from the back of the jeep. The moment Nia heard the call, her body stiffened and her gaze fixed on the vehicle. Her instincts kicked in. She stepped closer, eyes filled with both confusion and relief. Cassim halted a few meters away from Nia, careful not to invade her personal space. He gently placed Kovu on the ground and watched as the cub, still weak with anxiety, shuffled toward his mother. The moment they locked eyes, Nia lowered her head, her concern for her cub evident in every movement. Kovu, despite his fear, eagerly moved forward, his small paws scrambling over the dry earth. He nuzzled against Nia's warm fur, growling softly in a way that seemed to express both relief and gratitude. Nia, in turn, bent down to lick the dust from Kovu's back, her tongue moving with tenderness as she checked for any signs of injury. It was a simple gesture, but one filled with deep love and care. Cassim stood quietly, watching the reunion unfold. His heart warmed at the sight. He had seen many such reunions during his years at the reserve, but this one, between the protective mother and her vulnerable cub, felt particularly special. For a brief moment, all the dangers of the Serengeti, hyenas, predators, and the harshness of the wild seemed to fade away, leaving only the bond between mother and child. Nia, her eyes still wary, looked up at Cassim. She didn't threaten him, but there was a subtle acknowledgement in her gaze, a silent gratitude for the human who had saved her cub. She had learned to trust him over time, understanding that he only sought to protect the creatures of the Serengeti. Kovu, now content and reassured, glanced back at Cassim one last time. The cub's innocent eyes seemed to say, "Thank you," in the most pure and sincere way. Cassim smiled gently, stepping back to give the family space to be together. His mission had been completed. His job, after all, wasn't just about managing wildlife. It was about ensuring the survival of these magnificent creatures, these incredible bonds of life. As Nia and Kovu turned to leave, Cassim watched them walk slowly across the grasslands. The sun was higher now, bathing the Serengeti in a golden light. Birds chirped, and herds of antelopes grazed in the distance. The reserve, once again, was peaceful. Cassim stood there, reflecting on the work he did every day. He realized that moments like these, small victories, quiet triumphs, were the true reward of his job. Protecting these animals, maintaining their homes, and ensuring their safety was more than just a job for him. It was a purpose. With one last look at the mother and cub heading toward the horizon, Cassim turned back to the jeep. He carefully recorded the day's events in his notebook, knowing that this would be important data for the reserve's management. The journey wasn't over. The Serengeti, with all its beauty and dangers, would continue, and Cassim would remain part of its never-ending cycle of life and survival. As he drove back to the station, Cassim glanced one last time at the majestic landscape stretching before him. The Serengeti had a way of reminding him that life, in all its forms, was fragile but beautiful, and that the connection between humans and animals, though fragile, was one worth protecting.